Welcome to another lesson in the Restoration Movement series as we move through the books of Ezra-Nehemiah. We're going to be looking at the resolution part of the wall cycle today, and we'll be in chapters 4 and chapter 6. Before we do that, a question for you to think about as we begin. Was there a time when you did something bold or risky, and it might have been a good idea, it might have been a bad idea, but something you did that was bold or risky because someone else did it before you or did it alongside you? We're going to talk today about the strength of the people of Judah and the bold things they did because God was with them. Let's orient ourselves to where we are in the book. We're in this third cycle where Nehemiah is leading the wall building. We looked at the return and we looked at opposition. And in this lesson, we're going to look at the final part of the wall cycle, the resolution. And we're going to be skipping back and forth between some of these chapters. We looked at multiple rounds of opposition last time. Now we're going to fit in the multiple rounds of resolution to the wall building cycle. Thinking about timing, we're exactly in the same time period of the previous lesson in the roughly 2-month period between beginning the wall work and finishing the wall work. That took 52 days. So we're going to be exactly in that same time period looking at events that happened concurrently or right after in between, really, the events of last lesson. So we had a couple of rounds of opposition and a couple of rounds of resolution. So to get us there, just a quick reminder that we had one round of opposition in Nehemiah 2, verses 19 through 20, where we get introduced to these opposers. That wasn't really followed by much resolution, but I'm keeping the numbering the same so that we can look at rounds 1, 2, and 3 of opposition in last lesson, and we'll look at the matching rounds 1, 2, and 3 of resolution in this lesson. So there is no resolution to round 1 of opposition. We'll just keep that number the same. Let's move then to round 2 of resolution to match up with round 2 of opposition from the previous lesson. Nehemiah chapter 4, verses 13 through 23. Before we do that, let me just remind you where we are in the setting. What's happened in this round of opposition is that Sanballat and Tobiah have publicly mocked and taunted Nehemiah and the builders, and Nehemiah responds with an imprecatory prayer, more or less asking God to go get his opposers. And so now we're going to read a passage of Scripture that deals with a fuller response to these threats. So Nehemiah chapter 4, verses 13 through 23. Therefore I stationed some of the people behind the lowest points of the wall at the exposed places, posting them by families with their swords, spears, and bows. After I looked things over, I stood up and said to the nobles, the officials, and the rest of the people, don't be afraid of them. Remember the Lord who is great and awesome, and fight for your families, your sons and your daughters, your wives and your homes. When our enemies heard that we were aware of their plot and that God had frustrated it, we all returned to the wall, each to our own work. From that day on, half of my men did the work, while the other half were equipped with spears, shields, bows, and armor. The officers posted themselves behind all the people of Judah who were building the wall. Those who carried materials did their work with one hand and held a weapon in the other. And each of the builders wore his sword at his side as he worked. But the man who sounded the trumpet stayed with me. Then I said to the nobles, the officials, and the rest of the people, the work is extensive and spread out, and we are widely separated from each other along the wall. Wherever you hear the sound of the trumpet, join us there. Our God will fight for us. So we continued the work with half the men holding spears from the first light of dawn till the stars came out. At that time I also said to the people, have every man and his helper stay inside Jerusalem at night, so they can serve us as guards by night and as workers by day. Neither I nor my brothers, nor my men, nor the guards with me took off our clothes. Each had his weapon, even when he went for water. Let's talk about this second round of resolution. So what does Nehemiah do? He posts guards, and then he gives an encouraging speech that says, God is with us. And because of that, just briefly, the enemies back down. Now, not permanently, but they do for a bit. More complexity here. You've got to rotate guards. Some people have to be holding weapons while some hold the working tools. Some of those things you can't hold both at the same time. So you just got to make sure you've always got people on guard duty. And he tells the people, if there's an attack, rally to the trumpet, because that's where God will do the fighting for us. They even go so far as to post night guards, because you can't, for once, let your guard down. Nehemiah even says that many of the people wouldn't even change clothes, because you can't have a moment where you're not ready to fight. Full diligence here. So don't go fight. Don't even get a drink. You got to be armed the whole time and ready to go. So that's round 2 resolution. You do some work with guards, and you tell people that God is fighting with them. That's round 2. Now let's look at round 3 of the resolution from Nehemiah chapter 6, verses 9 through 16. What's happened right before this? Well, Sanballat and Geshem have invited Nehemiah to a meeting in sort of neutral territory. That's how they want to pose it. And Nehemiah refuses 4 times. He says, I'm not going. And then they say, well, we wouldn't want this to get out. Here's all these charges. We're going to issue this open letter, and we wouldn't want the king to find out that you're rebelling, and we're just here to help. But they know these are going to get out and just fill the land with misinformation, while they get to say, well, we didn't do it. We're just reporting these charges. So that's what's happened before this. And now here is Nehemiah's response to these things. This is chapter 6, beginning at the second part of verse 9. Nehemiah prays to the Lord, now strengthen my hands. One day I went to the house of Shemaiah, son of Delaiah, the son of Mehetabel, who was shut in at his home. He said, let us meet in the house of God, inside the temple, and let us close the temple doors, because men are coming to kill you. By night they are coming to kill you. But I, Nehemiah said, should a man like me run away? Or should someone like me go into the temple to save his life? I will not go. I realized that God had not sent him, but that he had prophesied against me because Tobiah and Sanballat had hired him. He had been hired to intimidate me so that I would commit a sin by doing this, and then they would give me a bad name to discredit me. Remember Tobiah and Sanballat, my God, because of what they've done. Remember also the prophet Noadiah, and how she and the rest of the prophets have been trying to intimidate me. So the wall was completed on the 25th of Elul in 52 days. When all our enemies heard about this, all the surrounding nations were afraid and lost their self-confidence, because they realized that this work had been done with the help of our God. So what do we get in this third round of resolution from this wall opposition? So again, Nehemiah prays for strength, common thing that he does. And then Shemaiah offers a temple meeting and protection. So we don't know what's going on here, but Nehemiah seems to know, and he refuses. He says, really, it's bad optics. That's what would it look like if I, the leader, ran to the temple for safety. A few things to help us understand exactly what Nehemiah's opposition is. He has armed guards. We saw that in chapter 4, verse 23. So he's got guards. It looked bad for a person who's got guards. Others don't, to go into hiding. In addition, we find out in chapter 13 that the priest Eliashib is in cahoots with Tobiah, the opposer. So Nehemiah may correctly smell something more like an assassination plot, where Tobiah's got priests on the inside. The temple would not then be a very safe place. Now, we might think Nehemiah refuses because it would be prohibited for him to go into the temple or to certain parts of the temple. He even uses the phrase sin in this passage. We can read some parts of Numbers and 1 Kings to understand more about who should or shouldn't go in the temple. But I don't think that's it, because Nehemiah does go into the temple later in chapter 13 to evict Tobiah and all his stuff. So it doesn't seem like the act of entering the temple is necessarily the problem. I think it's a matter of the governor and leader of the fight can't be seen going into hiding. And also, it may not even be safe, because there may be those who are ready to assassinate him once he gets on the inside. Furthermore, Nehemiah prays for God to remember Tobiah and Sanballat, and that's not a good remember. That's a, hey, don't forget them when you get around to punishing people. Remember what they've done. And then we return to just narrative facts. The wall is completed after 52 days. By the way, this is most likely the hottest part of their year in which this work was done. And we read that the enemies lose confidence because they realize that God is with the people of Judah and their wall building efforts. Let's talk about this theme of God is on our side and why that gives people confidence. I want to look at several passages where different leaders say this to the people. And let's just see what role this kind of motivational talk does for people. Look at Deuteronomy chapter 1, verses 29 through 31. Then I said to you, do not be terrified, do not be afraid of them. The Lord your God, who is going before you, will fight for you, as he did for you in Egypt, before your very eyes and in the wilderness. There you saw how the Lord your God carried you, as a father carries his son, all the way you went until you reached the place. Here's Deuteronomy chapter 7, verses 17 through 22. You may say to yourselves, these nations are stronger than we are. How can we drive them out? But do not be afraid of them. Remember well what the Lord your God did to Pharaoh and to all Egypt. You saw with your own eyes the great trials, the signs and wonders, the mighty hand and outstretched arm with which the Lord your God brought you out. The Lord your God will do the same to all the peoples you now fear. Moreover, the Lord your God will send the hornet among them until even the survivors who hide from you have perished. Do not be terrified by them, for the Lord your God who is among you is a great and awesome God. The Lord your God will drive out those nations before you, little by little. And here's Deuteronomy chapter 31, beginning in verse 1. Then Moses went out and spoke these words to all Israel. I am now 120 years old, and I am no longer able to lead you. The Lord has said to me, you shall not cross the Jordan. The Lord your God himself will cross over ahead of you. He will destroy these nations before you, and you will take possession of their land. Joshua also will cross over ahead of you, as the Lord said. And the Lord will do to them what he did to Sihon and Og, the kings of the Amorites, whom he destroyed along with their land. The Lord will deliver them to you, and you must do to them all that I have commanded you. Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or terrified because of them, for the Lord your God goes with you. He will never leave you nor forsake you. And Joshua 10, verses 7 and 8. So Joshua marched up from Gilgal with his entire army, including all the best fighting men. The Lord said to Joshua, do not be afraid of them. I have given them into your hand. Not one of them will be able to withstand you. And finally, 1 Samuel 17:37. The Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will rescue me from the hand of this Philistine. Saul said to David, go, and the Lord be with you. Here are some questions for you to think about. First, directly from those passages. How would you describe the general work of the Lord from these verses? What is he actually doing, and what would his work look like to the people who are experiencing it? What is the purpose of telling people things like, the Lord is with you, or the Lord will fight for you? And now think about some questions that are more applicable to your daily life as we move from processing the text to applying the text. Where do you need courage from God right now? Does someone else need courage from God right now? And how could you tell them that? How could you encourage them? What would you say to them? What are some other things Nehemiah did in addition to speaking encouraging words? And what do you think about that? So he gave a lot of encouragement. He did some things to go along with that. How do you think those kind of twin elements of speaking encouragement and doing some things to back up those claims, how do those work together? I want to close our lesson. Instead of a prayer, we're going to read this prayer from Psalm 25, verses 1 through 3. And in this psalm, the psalmist says, in you, Lord my God, I put my trust. I trust in you. Do not let me be put to shame, nor let my enemies triumph over me. No one who hopes in you will ever be put to shame, but shame will come on those who are treacherous without cause. Our next lesson will be finishing these. We've finished the 3 cycles. We're going to move into a couple of instances of covenant renewal. So we're going to be essentially in Nehemiah chapter 8, and we're going to talk about Ezra reading the book of the law and how the people process that. So thank you for being here, and we'll see you for the next lesson.